I'm Samantha Knitting. I am the gallery assistant here at the Alpha Art Gallery, joined today by Bob Sullivan, one of our featured artists for our upcoming exhibition with the New Brunswick Art Salons. This exhibition is entitled Transcendent Impressions. So we'll talk to Bob here. Would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background as an artist.
Absolutely, yeah. My name is Bob Sullivan, and I've pretty much been involved in graphic arts and fine arts my whole life. I worked in New York City in advertising agency selling cereal and lingerie and whiskey and things like that. But when I more or less retired in the year 2000, I started painting. And I didn't just start painting, I just picked up where I had left off in college. And I began to seek out painters whose work I admired, and I began to try to make contact with them and learn their techniques. And a number of the more famous artists were taught at the Florence Academy in Italy, and they employed techniques the old masters had developed, and continuing a progression that seemed to cease at the beginning of the 20th century. And with the advent of photography, many fine artists were frightened away from realism. And I can understand that, because a camera can snap something instantaneously and have a very, very close representation of what is actually there. But in the artist's mind, in my painting, I like to capture not just a moment, but kind of a combination of moments, a little bit of time flowing past the canvas so that you get the best shadow on these trees, you get the most interesting curve of the sail while the wind is filling it at this time. You know, when this boat and that boat and this boat are moving, you get to a spot where it kind of represents an afternoon rather than an instant, the way a photograph might. So I was very enthusiastic about that, and I've continued working with some of those artists, whether in Boston or in Sag Harbor, which is my hometown out in Long Island. So yeah, I found that I can take 2 or 3 hours and go out with an easel and a palette and capture a moment or a series of moments on the canvas, just like this one here, which really the light, the sky was never exactly like this, but over the course of the afternoon while I was there were times when the sun brightened up here and then darkened in the corners, but it reflected off the sand and it reflected off of the water in a way that I remembered and I wanted to, capture and bring home. And you can't really capture that in a photograph the same way. You might capture what it was like at an instant, but you won't really capture what it was like for the 2.5, 3.5, 4 or 5 hours they were there.
Experience there. So with this painting, you mentioned that you were there for a while, you saw the sun change. Did you paint this while you were there or afterwards?
Yeah, absolutely. No, the whole painting from start to finish was done while I was there. The signature I hold off until after I framed it, but otherwise I work with a palette, a very simple palette with 2 yellows, 2 blues, and 2 reds, and I can and white, and I can pretty much capture everything in the natural world with those. And I've learned what kinds of greens I can make with those blues and yellows that I have. How to mix red into make a black. Little tricks that simplify my kit when I go into the field, so that I'm not dragging. It's one of those processes where you have to be able to understand what the people are talking about before you can actually do it. You actually have to be able to see what it is you're trying to capture before you can capture it. So as my powers of observation increase, my technique increases to reach those levels of observation. But if I can't really see the beauty of a situation, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to paint it. Right. I've got to be able to understand it and see it first before I can really capture it. And then the frustrating is seeing it and not having the painting skills to be able to capture it. So it's an ongoing process.
You mentioned that you used to paint in college. Did you always know that you would be drawn to plein air painting, or is that something more recent?
No, when I was in college, my instructors always encouraged me to be as creative as possible, to in fact create my own signature to my paintings, be so unique that no one else would possibly be confused with me for work that was done. And painting figuratively or painting still lifes or painting landscapes was not encouraged. It was, abstract expressionism, conceptual art, modernism. There's a lot of movements that were acceptable, but realism was really not encouraged. And probably just being, the anti-social person that I am, I've decided I would do exactly what I was told not to do, so that might be what was my encouragement. But I think actually what I've always been attracted to, and whether it's a museum or a gallery, is just how the artist got that paint on the canvas to look that way, and why I love it so much. What is it about, that surface with that paint on it that is so mesmerizing, and that was my motivation for continuing. And to this day, I still love the look of mere paint on canvas that can transport you 1,000,000 miles away or bring you into an emotional state. But when all it is really, it's just, it's just some pigment and medium on some canvas, but the combination of colors and strokes and textures and lights and darks work in a magical way, and I love that. I just love that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It makes you feel something, and that's really important.
Absolutely. It's if someone looks at my painting and says, "Oh, that looks just like a photograph," I'll go, "Well, that's a compliment, and thank you very much." But if someone else says, "Oh man, that painting makes me feel like I'm right there," that's what I get it as like, okay, that's what I will hope to do, is to transport you to this
share
place.
Exactly what your perspective was. And that's awesome. So one last thing to close off for any maybe potential young artists out there needing a little inspiration or a little advice, what advice would you have to give anyone aspiring to make art?
My advice would be, don't quit. The only guaranteed way to fail is if you quit. Stay at it, because it's not easy. In fact, one of my instructors told me, he said, if you're having fun, you're probably not doing it right. And I took that as kind of harsh, but I realized, it's not just fun and games. It is work. It is difficult. Another guy that I know who's a brain surgeon said, when he was asked which was more difficult, painting or brain surgery, he said, "Oh, painting's much more difficult. Brain surgery is you know what you're supposed to do. With painting, you're never quite sure what's supposed to be finished and when it's finished, or how to go about it." So my advice to beginners and newcomers is, don't give up. Things don't come off the way you expect them to, but if you keep working at it, you'll bring your picture, your image around to the way you like it, and it takes time, and but the trip is worthwhile. In fact, it's fun. It really is. Don't listen to my other instructor. I do have a good time doing it.
That's good. That's good. Well, thank you so much, Bob, for coming here today and talking.